but very appropriate for our class because we're talking about rights and things.
Yeah, it was really well done.
Yeah. So let's take a look at rights and responsibilities. Oh, no. Oh, there we go. Now, if you remember in grade 10 civics, you guys probably did a little bit about rights and responsibilities, but we're going to delve much deeper into it in this course as it's a grade 12 class. So let's take a look at some key documents. The Universal Declaration of Rights, Charter of Rights and Freedoms, Geneva Conventions, emergency power, etc. Now, there's certain things that have been implemented, since March in Canada. Emergency power has been used to, change the laws, take away freedoms in the name of safety, things like that, right? And, there's a lot of protest against it, but there's also a lot of acceptance because, again, in the name of safety. If you remember the part of the video where they go to China and the professor basically laughs at the Western countries' view on freedom, it's a very interesting, take on it because the West is all about freedom. But, we also obviously want our safety. And there have been a number of times in our history, in our recent history, where our freedom has been taken away from us in the name of safety. One of the biggest ones in recent memory, for you guys, it's in, before your time. But wait, when were you born? What year were you born?
2003.
Right. So you guys weren't even born when September 11th, 2001, the terrorist attacks happened. Everything changed after that. Nothing's been the same, in terms of freedom and safety. The Americans created, Homeland Security. When you travel on the planes, before, if I would take a flight to the United States, I would literally just need my driver's license. Now, I mean, I don't mean now because it's COVID time, but before COVID, you have to have a passport, and you have, very, very strict screening before you get on the plane. There's mandatory shoe, take your shoes off, put them on the conveyor belt. Sometimes they do random pat downs, etc. And that all came about after September 11th. Today, after, when we all locked down back in March, a lot of our freedoms were taken away in the name of, curbing this virus. And most people accept it, right? But there's always going to be a backlash to taking away our freedoms because, people don't want their freedoms taken away. You could travel with driver's license to the United States, yes. Even just crossing the border, totally not happening anymore. I think today you can still fly between. No, I don't think so. Within Canada, I think you still need a passport. But before you just needed some kind of ID to show you that you're going on a flight. The Human Rights Declaration. We see it as such an important aspect of our lives, but as you see in this video, many countries, they don't really follow it. Even Canada, to a certain point, has different rules for different people outside of the country and inside of the country. And there are advocates that are working very hard to bring justice for people who have been wronged, especially by a great country like Canada that was responsible for a big part of the Declaration of Human Rights. I mean, it was written by a Canadian, right? The Canadians have their own charter, and I have one on my wall here. I have this document printed out It's not. Well, I didn't print it out, but I got it at like some conference once, and it's it's very important to Canada. Everything that it says, right? So, fundamental freedoms that we have: conscience and religion, thought, belief, opinion, expression, including freedom of the press and other media communication. We often take this for granted in Canada. All of these things: freedom of peaceful assembly, freedom of association. In a lot of places in the world, it's illegal to, assemble in groups, basically. This was one of the freedoms that we have been taken away, that have been taken away from us in Canada. But ironically, people have been protesting. So during the COVID lockdown time, we've also seen the rise in protests, especially with the BLM movement. Technically, we're not allowed to be in groups of more than, well, they just changed it again, 25 people outside. But when it comes to protests, there's a difference between what's written on paper and what is actually, enforced. Excuse me. Excuse me. You know what the worst thing about this thing is? It's allergy season. And then, you sneeze because you're allergic to a plant, and then people are like, COVID? Well, what are you going to do? Freedom of association. We take our, democratic rights very, 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 it's very important to us, voting, even though the percentage of people that actually vote in Canada is actually quite small. If you look back at the history of the vote in Canada, it's definitely not 100%. Some Western countries have mandatory voting. In Australia, if you don't vote, you get a fine of over $100. Percentage in America is 58. That's pretty high, as far as I'm concerned. Are you sure it's that high, Tyler? Did you Google it? The other day. Interesting. Okay. So in Canada, a lot of people are apathetic to the vote. They don't vote for either deliberate conscious reasons or laziness. In other parts of the world, it's totally mandatory. You don't even just get a fine, but you have to vote. And these are the countries that are typically ones that don't really have that same fundamental list of rights that we do. This was just for the 2016 election. We're still going to be in this class when the American election occurs, and it's November 3rd. And it's going to be very interesting to see how it goes down, because, a lot of news outlets, especially the ones that are opposed to Trump, are trying to get information out to the masses about how Trump is trying to, change the election, to rig it, to create, everything in his favor. Kind of like just what Putin did. Putin is basically president for life, but he is a democratically elected official. The video I wanted to show you, even though it doesn't work for me, when you guys watch it on your own, there's been a lot of Putin, people, opposers, who have been poisoned. And, no proof with anything and tied to anybody, but it's unusual, to say the least, that, there's a big name in the news recently. How are prisoners counted in part of voter turnout? In the 58% people can vote, but how many adults in the U.S. vote? Well, yeah, even the whole system is, it's going to be weird this year because of the whole mail thing. Just the other day on the news, I was reading that somebody found a whole box of mail-in ballots in the garbage, because they already opened the election in the States, right? You can early election, especially mail-in votes, and correct me if I'm wrong, but some countries do not allow prisoners to vote. It's one of the rights that are taken away from them.
Canada does though, right?
Why do Americans have to register? Again, another issue in American politics is the idea and that you have to register to vote. In Canada, we kind of are registered to vote too. You know, is anybody? I guess you're turning 18 in January, starting January. Is that how it works? Right. So you'll get something in the mail saying, "Here's your official registration." Well, it's not called a registration, but here's your official, document to say that you can vote. But it only comes to you during the election time. So you're basically, as long as you're a citizen, you're over 18, and your address fits the area, you can vote. In the United States, people have to actually go out and register themselves. So there's a lot of teams that go around trying to get people to register. And yeah, voter suppression is one of the what a lot of people talk about as being, the reason why it's not easier to vote in the States. And, there's a lot of call for change in that system with the whole registration thing. But, if you really dig deep into the media and find news sources talking about it, you'll often find that people writing articles about how certain, regions deliberately, or certain politicians deliberately change laws or make it very difficult for certain people to vote, right? And so it's definitely, not as easy as you're a citizen, you can vote, So in some of the things that we have, legal rights, equality rights, very important in Canada, mobility rights, official language rights. Mobility rights is something we take for granted too. We take a lot of this for granted as Canadians. If you wanted to go to Quebec, you can go to the Quebec. Now, again, some of these rights have been temporarily taken away from us. Early on during the lockdown, I don't know if you ever watched Ford and his when he came online to do his little speeches, but there was one I'll remember for a while where he was like, we love the rest of you, Canada, but do not come to Ontario. We don't want you here right now. And they basically closed the borders, not only between the United States and Canada, which is still closed, but between provinces. So, personally, I have a cottage in Quebec, and we didn't go this summer because the rules were very unclear in whether or not we can go there or not. I didn't want to travel 5 hours to the border to be turned back at the border. Because that would have been really crazy. And then, mobility rights, the ability to travel, to go places, even on a big or small scale. I don't know if you remember, but back in March, April, May, you weren't even allowed to go outside. You could walk your dog. You could not stop in a park. The only thing you could do is go outside, and a lot of people were protesting against this. And then what happened, ironically, was that the city of Toronto, that's where I used to live. I moved up north this summer, but basically changed it entirely to encourage people to go outside. So they ended up all summer, every Sunday, closing off all these streets to cars to encourage people to get outside. So we went from literally, you cannot go outside into a park, or else you'll get an $800 ticket, to everybody go outside and do your thing. Right? So, of course, if a second wave actually occurs, and I know Trump just said that the second wave is actually happening in a couple areas of Canada. We now have 6 months of precedence of real world data to know what worked and what didn't work. And that's why this time around, for a second wave, they're going to try to avoid a total lockdown. But what they're going to do, and they already did, like this week when Ford said, okay, so we're scaling back. You can have 10 people inside and 25 people outside. That went from, I think it was 50 people outside, and I can't remember how much was inside. And then, these are our rights. And during emergency acts, the government has the right to take away these rights from us, in the name of safety. But in going back to the idea that we can travel freely during non-COVID times, places like China, you can't travel from province to province without, an official allowance of the government. You can definitely not leave the country without, the government saying you can leave. I remember I went to university in Australia, and there was two Chinese, citizens who were both doing their degrees in Australia, and both of these men had wives and children in China, and the government was paying 100% for these two individuals to go to school in Australia. They paid for their education, they paid for everything, and China is known for this, for sending students all around the world. I mean, you guys all go to St. Rob's, you know this, that there's a lot of Chinese students here, and there's, we're not going to go into the reasons why, but basically China is, really high up on education, obviously. But these two individuals were not allowed to, their wives and their children were not allowed to leave the town or city that they lived in, at all. Like, they couldn't even travel to Australia to see their husband or their father while he was going to school there. And they were very, very closely monitored by the officials.
Sir, did you go to university in Australia?
I went to teachers college there. Yeah.
Wait, sir, I have an irrelevant question. How long were you there for? Like
1 year. Teachers college back when I went to school was 1 year. Now it's 2 years.
So you didn't pick up an accent or anything?
No, I think typically people don't pick up accents after they're no longer kids.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's so sick. Did you see kangaroos?
Oh man, the first day I got there, so I lived in residence, and residence in the university I went to, it was Canberra, which is the capital city, was a whole bunch of 12-person like barracks. They looked like large, like portables, and 12 people lived in each one. And I was walking home, and all of a sudden I look, and right in front of the door, there was like 25 kangaroos just grazing on the grass, and the biggest one, the alpha male, was standing right in front of me. And these kangaroos are over 6 feet tall, and they're huge and jacked, tiny little arms, right? Did you see? No, I didn't see emus. And I was like, what am I gonna do? Like, I gotta get and they're rats. They're basically rodents, right? They have they kind of look like a dog or a rat. So I was like, 1, 2, 3, and I ran right past them and went to the door.
They can get vicious.
Well, their claws are as long as your fingernails, and when they attack, they kick and they go like this, right? So they scrape you.
I heard they punch.
Sir.
They punch with their arms, but they kick you with their legs. And I'm telling you, their claws are longer than your fingers. So when I was there for orientation, they tell you about, there's a lot of animals in Australia that can kill you. Like something like 8 out of the 10 most dangerous animals live in Australia in the whole world. So what they tell you to do is you got to go sideways if you ever confront a kangaroo, because if they claw at you from the front, they open up your stomach and your intestines and all your vital organs fall out. But if they get you from the side, it's not going to happen. It's not that. You know what I mean?
I have like half my family actually lives in Australia.
Yeah.
And they always talk about the kangaroos there and how they're scared to like approach them, so they just like keep their distance.
Yeah, there are as many kangaroos as there are here, Canada geese. They hang out in flocks of like 20. They call them gangs, I think. And mostly they just keep to themselves, eating grass. But yeah, they're not vicious, but they do defend.
Did you see koalas?
Yeah. So I was in Canberra. If you look on a map where you can see where that is, it's a sort of southeast corner of Australia, which is actually more south than we are to the North Pole.
Oh, wow.
But when we drove all the way up the coast, you know exactly when you make it to the Tropic of what's the south one? Tropic of Capricorn. Because as soon as you go to the Tropic of Capricorn, you see a lot of dead animals on the road when you're driving, and they're usually kangaroos. But as soon as you hit the Tropic of Capricorn, all the dead roadkill becomes koalas because they live in the tropic, right? So they live between the Tropic of Capricorn and the, I guess there's no equator there, but yeah.
Oh my God, did you learn to surf?
I didn't surf, but I did go in the ocean in Sydney a lot because Canberra is not in the on the ocean, but we did a lot of weekend trips to Sydney, which was like a 2-hour drive. And Sydney has Bondi Beach, which is like a world famous beach. But this is on a segue. This is what I always tell the grade 12s I teach. But you know what? Maybe right now in COVID times, it's a little different. When you go to school or do university, go as far away from your parents as possible, or at least go to another town, because it's a huge life, skill and situation. If you can, obviously, because it costs more money to do that. But, it's a whole life experience to go away for school. Did you eat roadkill? No, I didn't eat roadkill, but we did eat kangaroo all the time. Because kangaroo meat is much cheaper than any other meat because it never rains in Australia, at least in the southern part. So nothing grows. It's basically desert, right? Anyway, Australia was cool. Okay, so the Geneva Conventions. Basically, the United States was one of the countries that pledged to uphold the Geneva Conventions. In a nutshell, it discusses things like war crimes or rules during war. So things like, only soldiers can kill soldiers can't kill civilians, things like that. Now, on paper, it sounds great, but do countries actually follow these things? Arguably, right? Arguably. So, things like collective punishment of prisoners is prohibited. When a prisoner is captured, all they have to do is give their name, rank, and birthday and identification number. Food, clothing, medication is supposed to be supplied, et cetera, et cetera. And, if you Google, I don't think you should Google, but during the second Iraq war there, 2003, there was a lot of pictures from a prison called Abu Ghraib, where American soldiers were basically abusing Iraqi soldier prisoners. And, they were absolutely not following the Geneva Convention. No physical, mental torture. And a lot of publications or people try to prove that the United States basically do, or through the CIA or privately, not follow the Geneva Convention, so they can't bomb towns. So the thing with bombing towns is that if there's a declaration of war, then typically, they give time for civilians to leave. And, there shouldn't be any civilians left. Does that make sense? Right? Now, emergency power. We've seen the War Measures Act being implemented in the First and Second World War during the October crisis in Canada. It was repealed in 1988. Then we had the Emergencies Act enacted in 1988. And then another Anti-Terrorism Act in 2001. And basically, these documents or acts serve for the government to be able to do things they're not normally allowed to do, again, in the name of, in terms of the war to win the war ultimately, or in the October crisis, to protect the citizens. You guys remember what the October crisis is? Did you ever make it there in grade 10 history when you were taking grade 10 history? Or did you spend most of your time on the First and Second World War? Anyway, so basically October crisis is, in 1970, in a nutshell, that's Trudeau's father, Pierre Elliott Trudeau, who was also prime minister. Quebec has a long history of, a lot of people in Quebec want to separate. Dina, because of my parents' time, they did. Again, the Geneva Convention has been around a lot longer than your parents. And unfortunately, the point I'm trying to make is that even though it exists, it's not followed all the time, the rules of engagement and things like that, unfortunately. So, and many countries did not sign the document, so it doesn't really apply. I mean, it does apply to them if they're losers, but not if they're winners. Anyway, so basically the October crisis, was a time in Canada and in Quebec when, people in the members of the Front, the Liberation a group in Quebec, basically they kidnapped a politician and a British guy, a British diplomat, and basically, it became people again. The military had to be called in, and the War Measures Act was enabled so that the police would have more power than they did normally or do normally. A lot of violence occurred during this time. A lot of English-speaking Quebecers left Quebec for safety reasons. So, my neighbor, I told you I moved up north, and my new neighbor, getting to know him, he grew up in Montreal, but he doesn't speak French at all. And his parents never spoke French and everything, and they left Montreal in this time and never went back. A lot of English-speaking, Quebecers still live in Quebec, especially Montreal. If you ever go to Montreal and you go to the west part of Montreal, it's all English-speaking. But in a nutshell, Quebec and many Quebecers, the Bloc Québécois, very much want sovereignty, right? And these extremists took it to a whole new level. So, we have personal freedoms, but we also have personal responsibilities. I have a couple documents that that I've posted that you can read about these in more detail. But basically, as we grow older, we have more freedom. When you're a child right now, you have a lot less freedom than you will when you're 18 soon. Within the next year, I guess you guys are all turning 18 more or less. But as a child, from the government, but also from your parents, you don't have the same freedoms. You have responsibilities, but again, a lot of the things that you do or don't do are accountable to your parents. So let's ask the question, do you guys have freedom as a high school student? How much freedom do you have as a high school student?
A decent amount.
Yeah, and
Like
you
the
feel like this
appropriate.
year it's a lot different. I mean, how many of you are in cohort A or B? And
Oh,
coming-
you mean this year?
Well, we can talk about in general, but let's make it real. Like, both. Let's talk about the freedoms that have been taken away from you.
Cafeteria, talking in the cafeteria.
Clubs, joining clubs.
The freedom of assembly, right? I don't mean having an assembly. I mean assembling.
Yeah.
But at 11 o'clock, I'm out in the portable. You guys are going to be here after October 9th. I go back into school and all the students are getting ready to go home, and there's no social distancing. There's no, it's all groups. And then you see the Miss Steele and be like, can please social distance, please social distance. What do you guys think as the people that are your age how do people in your, demographic, your age group, view all this stuff about, congregation or 6 feet apart or whatever? Like, is it something that you really you're not scared of the COVID, or what's going on? Like, I'm curious.
I don't really know about other people, but I don't know. Some people are selfish. They might not care. Like, yeah, it doesn't affect you, but it depends if you live with like elderly people like in your house, or you just can't give COVID to someone in your family because they might have like, a really weak immune system. Like, it really just depends on every person's like family.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm in cohort C.
What's that, Sarah?
I said I'm in cohort C, so I actually don't even go to school.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So you're not. So I'm curious. Why did you choose cohort C?
I think, I don't know. A lot of the portion of reason I chose cohort C is just, one, I have grandparents, and I take care of them quite a bit, and I'm with them a lot. So there was kind of like that portion of responsibility. I couldn't ever, be the one to get them sick. I just didn't want to. But also there was another aspect that everything about school that was why we would go into school was, that social aspect, right? A lot of it was that social aspect. And I had a lot of friends, eager to go to school because they thought that's what they were getting.
Yeah.
And just like through like keeping to do like doing the research, like cafeterias are closed, libraries are closed, my bus got canceled. So it became increasingly difficult. And I think a lot of the reason too of staying home is I kind of want to see what happened. I'd rather make a routine like with online school, because there's a higher chance that it's harder to adjust from being in school to online if we are to close down schools again, which is still like, a possibility right now due to the winter coming. So I was kind of like, if I can, like if schools close down, I'll still have a routine that I'm used to.
Yeah.
And if schools don't, then in, second semester, I can go back.
Yeah, I'm sure. I think it's very like, I really don't think it's reasonable to go back to school, like even just for cohorts A and B, because each class still has like quite like a large portion of students that like stay home, and like the teacher has to present on like Google Meet and everything too. So if you're just like present in class while your teacher's teaching literally the same thing online, it's just like you're just going to get COVID, like, or the chance of getting it when you can just stay home, like in the comfort of your own home, like just learn.
Right. Listen here, being home is boring.
Are you cohort C, Matthew?
I am cohort. I'm a proud cohort A.
Oh no, I saw you the other day. Yeah, right.
I'm a proud cohort A. All right, I will go to school and I will sit there and I will listen, because if I'm at home, the chances of me paying attention are little to none. Okay, if I'm in a classroom.
This is my imitation of Matthew during class.
Yeah, it's like it does differ, because I have some friends that they swear onto the fact that they can't sit at home and listen, whereas I'm not too bad with it. Like, I can pay attention.
I think it's because like most people just lie down in their beds and just hold their laptops, like they're tempted to sleep, so they like don't pay attention. But if you like sit at a desk like at home and just like shut off your electronics or whatever and just actually pay attention, it's much more effective than going to school.
And even like putting like one thing for me is even putting on your camera helps me pay more attention, because I know you can see me.
Yeah.
So
like
it's more effective to me because I feel like I'm having a conversation with someone. Do you know what I mean? Like I can see people's reactions. It's easier to even hold myself accountable if like I start dozing off. I'll be like, oh, he can see me.
Okay, like this class is one thing, but like for my math class, the only days I learn something are the days I'm in class. When I'm at home, it's so much harder to follow because she's teaching kids in class. She doesn't care what you're doing. She doesn't read the comments. She's teaching the kids. She's answering their questions. Like, it's so much better to be in person. And you guys haven't been to school. You don't know how it is. You're not going to get COVID. Maybe in the parking lot, but there's like no one near you in class.
Okay, but you don't know where those people have been or who they've been like around.
But they're wearing a mask.
Yeah, we all have
It
masks.
doesn't matter. Like you can still get it even if you're both wearing masks and you're two.
Yeah, but you could get it everywhere. Do you stay at home all day, every day?
No, but like
But
the
I
people
think
I
very-
only deal with people I know that are careful and like
But I
actually
sure.
follow.
But I also think like I completely get why people go into school. I personally had to decrease the chances just because of like my personal situation. Like I in no way reprimand anyone that goes to school. In fact, if that was your decision, it was a smart one if it's best for you. I just think especially with flu season coming up, I was still kind of honestly on my part, I was scared. And I think me going into school, I'd always have that thing like that subconscious going, what if you get it? What if you get it? What if you get it? What if you give it to someone you care about?
Yeah,
Right.
I agree with that.
You know,
Do your grandparents live with you?
No, but I'm with them like every week, multiple times a week.
Yeah, but what I told my mom is I was like, if you actually like don't want to give it to them, stop seeing them.
But that's harder said than done.
No,
Yeah.
it's not. I could do that easy, and then I could go live my life, and they could be safe in their house.
Yeah, but when
So,
you
yeah,
help
but
your
some people
grandparents
are-
buy groceries or help them get their medication, or when you're genuine, like help them clean, make dinner, like it's different when you're that big of a factor in their lives. It's not like when I go see my grandparents, I'm very much similar to like being their kid. It's I can't just go, I'm not going to see my parents.
Yeah.
I mean, like it's a different level on my part. It's a different level of relationship with them just being grandparents. Like I personally couldn't. No.
Like
Yeah,
when-
but, like, you have
when you're really
friends and
close
you go
to your
see your
grandparents, like when you're really close to like your grandparents, it's kind of like the same thing as I don't know, like maybe you have a very ill friend, like it's like you can't go without seeing like your friends. That's like the same thing for some people and their like families. Like they have to see their families.
But
or
it's
they
also if I take chances, if I'm being like not even going to school, because my parents weren't even that harsh on me going to school. I made this decision on my own. But if like I'm going out 24/7 and seeing a bunch of people and I decide not to see my grandparents, who's to say my parents, like I still see my parents because I live with them. And if I limit myself from seeing my grandparents, I then would have to limit my parents from seeing their own parents. And that in itself isn't fair.
I think the point is that everybody's story is different, right? So none of you are wrong. That's the point, right? And it's very interesting to know why. So one fact that we had a staff meeting online the other day on Tuesday, and when we started the year this year, there was 300 cohort C's. As of Tuesday, there was like 650, and every day they add more and more and more.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of them are saying, it's not even about. So I guess all the people started at school, so it wasn't about knowing that they have family members who might be immunocompromised, whatever. But it was like they show up to school, they spend a week at school, and realize that everything the class is doing is exactly the same as people at home. But
if I go to cohort,
Matthew
it's going to
had
be
a good
because
point,
it's easier
right?
to cheat on tests.
Well, okay, and a lot of teachers aren't even giving tests because,
Yeah.
it's totally a weird thing online versus being at school. But, Matthew's point, like a lot of people have that same idea where it's like they have to go to school because of like self-discipline,
Mm-hmm.
right? And or even, like you're saying, like the math teacher is not really helping the people at home as much as they can at school. there's no wrong answer to this. But the idea is that I think more and more people. I mean, we know more and more people are changing to cohort C because of whatever reason, right? But the point is, let's go back to the freedoms that you have, right? Like, yeah, all the fun things about high school are taken away, right? All the fun things like mass and things. That was a joke.
So we still have virtual mass.
Oh my god, that was hilarious.
I didn't. When I was watching that mass, I was like, "Are there people in there with them?" Because he's like, "Okay, everybody, this and that." You know what? They got to do it. It was pretty fast because they like a whole segment of the mass was not 100 dislikes.
Oh
The
my
mass.
God.
Ooh, they didn't turn off dislikes. Nice. That's hilarious. Yeah, because they had to create a whole St. Rob's YouTube channel for that. Jeez, that's funny.
So funny.
But they did what they need to do. Anyway,
They made a YouTube channel for St. Rob's.
yeah, that's the way. It's like a St. Rob's YouTube channel now. They literally created it because moving forward, they're going to have more masses, and and that's why nobody got the link until like 9:45 because like the whole morning they were scrambling to set it all up.
Sure,
But
if
you
we
know what?
have
Once it's
mass,
set up,
we should
it's
have
set up.
civies too.
Pardon me?
I said if we have mass, we should have civies too.
I'm in civies every day.
Yeah.
You know what? My question, yeah, I mean, civic
Ooh,
days probably.
you
still
have
happen.
to be in uniform when you go to school?
Oh yeah, my grade 9s. I have grade 9 period 1, and there's one kid who is he's in cohort C and he's in uniform every day.
Oh, is
Cohort C online.
have you told him he doesn't have to?
No, I think it's awesome.
Oh my god. Are we
But yeah, it's grade 9. Oh man, you guys, my heart breaks for the grade 9s. Like, it's so horrible for them. I mean, you guys already know. You're older, you understand. This is their first experience, so you guys made friends.
My heart breaks for the grade 12s.
Yeah, I know. My heart breaks for you guys too. Your last year, or my heart breaks for the first year university students.
Sure, we're all actually screwed. Like for university, like
Oh.
we have it so easy right now, but as soon as we walk into that, like the first day of uni, we're all gonna be like,
We're gonna
"What?"
go from courses to 5.
Well, who knows if you're going to walk in because a lot of universities online, right? Just like it is
You
here.
think we'll still be online by then?
There's no way to speculate.
Yeah.
No, do you remember back in March, everyone was like, "This will be 2 months and it's over."
No,
Yeah.
but even back in
I
March,
thought we were gonna come back after
18
like
months.
March break.
Did you know March was like there's only like 5 or 6 months left until March? Like, isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I can tell you what. Yes, Tyler, there was a mass period 1. Do you have period 1 class, Tyler? Yes, the mass was yesterday. Anyway, so a lot of I know a couple first year university students, and they chose to move to the city that they're going to, even though they're online, because a big part of their life is still.
Hashtag move.
Yeah, I know my sister's my wife's sister's stepkids. They're 2 twins. They one moved to Western, one moved to Queens, even though both are online.
I just think right now that kind of seems. I don't know. A lot of people are moving.
yeah, because you're still having your experience. I mean, it's not like we have to stay inside all day every day, right? A lot of people joke about like if you wouldn't have watched the news, would you still know that there was something going on, like other than going to the store, right?
No.
Yeah, true.
So let's take a look at some personal responsibilities I have. Speaking of moving out, and budgeting your money, especially when you become an adult, it looks overwhelming. all these things you got to deal with. Your car, I don't know about tolls. I mean, some people take the 407, but pay for your house, your gas, your hydro. Personally, I'll tell you what I have on this list. I have a car. I have 2 cars, house payments, natural gas, hydro, insurance. I don't have cable because it's 2020. Income tax gets taken off, union dues. Yeah. No, I don't know about donations. Food, we don't go out anymore to eat, obviously. Gas, cell phone, water bill, internet, like they pile up, right? So, it's very important. And that's one of the things that they don't teach you in math, although they are now, right? The new curriculum. And I don't know what grade, maybe it's just earlier grades, elementary, but teaching finances and personal budgeting and stuff.
They taught us in civics and careers.
In careers, yeah, not civics, probably.
Yeah, careers, but like that kind of course.
Yeah. So how are responsibilities assumed when considering the rule of law? Well, that question is an interesting one. We talk about, the responsibilities change, right? So right now, we have new rules, even new laws been implemented, and it's our responsibility to follow them. Are people following them? Not everyone. Every morning on my drive to work, almost at least once a week, I hear there was this huge, massive party in Brampton. I don't know why it's always Brampton, but with hundreds and hundreds of people, and a lot of people, don't like this type of people because they're like, well, you're ruining it for everybody. If we would have had everybody follow the rules to a T, we might be out of it by now, right? But it's again, you can't really tell. Yeah.
I heard a lot of people were saying, like, when this whole thing, like the first outbreak started, if everyone just stayed inside for like 2 weeks and no one did anything for 2 weeks, because like that's the time period, that it would have been fine. But I don't know if that's even actually true.
It might be true, but it's not possible because
It's literally impossible.
people still needed to get food. People still needed to get, supplies, things like that. So remember, when everything got locked down, grocery stores did not get locked down. Poor grocery store workers, right? They were very scared because nobody knew what was going on.
They were treated so bad.
Well, that's another thing, right? They're one of the most important, jobs one can have is a grocery store clerk right now, and even always has been. But some people, all the Karens out there, they're not very nice. What a time to be called Karen. I feel bad.
I don't think anybody will name their kid Karen for a long time.
So have you not seen graphs? People have been studying this and looking at graphs. Basically, like 2 kids got called Karen in all of North America this year.
Poor kids.
Yeah, I know.
So I don't think it's random. I think like it's because a lot of these people are like 45 to 55, and back then this was a popular name.
Yeah, I know. It's just one of those things. Who would have thought that the name Karen would be associated with Karens, right? Because these people have been around for a very long time, right? The I'm more important than you type of mentality, which is, it's a horrible mentality to have, but it does exist. Okay, so, Canadian concentration camps, World War I, World War II, did they exist?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
We had internment camps. We had, rights taken away from certain people, in the First World War, many Asians of Asian descent, especially Germans, and Second World War.
Internment camps, weren't they here too?
Yeah. Japanese in the Second World War, very famous. So sometimes, it's not just a blanket statement with rights. It's during times, especially of war or crisis, individual groups have certain rights taken away where others are not taken away. Things like that, right? So, here we go. Here's a whole a couple couple internment camps that existed in the First World War and work sites. Notice there's a couple that are very close to us. In fact, one of them near Toronto is now sort of a museum kind of park that you can actually go to. There's not much there, but you can go to the land and see it. But they did exist. Canada has a really good way of kind of like hiding their negative past. But it's coming out. We also had a couple actual like concentration camps, especially in the same area of the BC. So civil rights, somebody did their presentation on basically civil rights, and the Americans have been fighting very long time for the rights of people, not just black people, but everybody. But then there's also a whole group of people that fight against rights. In Canada, we have a long history of that too. But we also seem to be one of the countries that are the first in line to legalize things like gay marriage or further back, marriage between races, or further back, voting rights. These are all part of civil rights movements. And are we close to having rights for everybody? Absolutely not. But hopefully we are. And all these things are attached to the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. That's the point we're making. So, in the United States, especially, there's a huge gap between the education of, blacks and whites. And a big part of that is the way that their system is created. So funding in the United States is a lot of the time is funded on achievement, not neighborhood. So what does that mean? It means that the school does better, they get more money. And Americans love standardized testing. Here in Canada, you guys have your grade 9 test, which is not counted much, and then your grade 10 test, which is you have to EQAO or whatever to graduate high school. In the United States, by the time they graduate high school, I remember hearing, don't quote me on the actual number, but it was like 350 standardized tests that these students have taken. Yeah. And that's how they fund. So it's like a chicken and the egg situation for a lot of, poor black communities where they don't have the funding, so they can't get higher test scores. And then because they don't get higher test scores, they get less funding. And of all the many aspects of the BLM movement, this is a very, very important one, is education. Let's take a 10-minute break. Cool.